What's up guys, today I'm going to be showing off two of easily the most fun builds I've ever used in Destiny 2. And these builds aren't only just really fun, they're also extremely good. And there's going to be one build for Warlock, then one build for Hunter, and both are going to revolve around the Grapple, something I really haven't shown off in videos so far, because most of my stream builds have been with suspend effects. But the Grapple has a lot of really cool things to offer that are arguably just as strong, if not stronger. So jumping into the Warlock build first, as we mentioned, starting off with the Grapple. And when you grapple, you'll be able to do a melee, and the melee will do a AoE damage and unravel targets. And on Warlock with the aspect, or grapple melee will also spawn 3 threadling eggs. So the whole goal of this build will be to spam these grapple melees as often as possible, because as you see, when you do them, you get a lot of AoE effects from the initial damage, the unravel, and the threadlings. So we have two goals: spam them as often as possible and make them do more damage. So looking at our fragments to achieve these, first we have Thread of Evolution to make our threadlings do more damage and travel further. Then we have Thread of Generation, where dealing any sort of damage will help get our grenade back. Then we have Thread of Rebirth. This one's kind of a freebie, but I just have it on to create more threadlings with our strand weapons. Then Thread of Warding for the Woven Mill and the 50% DR. So just with our fragments, the way this works is every single time we use our grapple melee, we'll spawn in 3 threadlings, which will do increased damage because of the fragment. And the damage from the unravel, threadlings, and the initial melee is almost enough most of the time just to get your grenade back from Thread of Generation. And to further push both of our goals of spamming and more damage, we have Verity's Brow, which means we then need a strand weapon, and preferably one with demo, so something like the Trials SMG, or the Raid AR, or even for harder content, I like to swap over to the Neomuna machine gun with demo, but one of those 3 will work perfectly fine. And these weapons will allow us to do 2 things. One is get the death throws from Verity's Brow up to ×5, which will half our grenade recharge time, making it just that much quicker to get our grapple back. And these weapons all have demo on it, which means getting kills with those weapons will further increase our grenade recharge rate. And when we use our grapple, it will reload our weapon, so you can kind of ignore reloading with this build too. But with Verity's Brow, it also doubles grenade damage, and that does work with the grapple melee, taking the impacts from 24,000 to 48,000. So Verity's will not only give us our grapple back faster, it'll make it do double damage. And looking at all the mods on this build, one thing to note is the grapple melee will count for a lot of melee perks and grenade perks. So we have double ashes to assets to get our super very quickly, then a strand siphon to create orbs. And we have both a heavy-handed and firepower, both of which work with the grapple melee. It counts as a grenade and melee final blow. Then we have one grenade kickstart to get a chunk back when we first use it. Then we have a charged up along with whatever reserve or resist perks you want. Then we have 1 stacks on stacks. Then we have double innervation. I'll be changing the second innervation to recuperation for harder content. Then on our bond, we have 1 bomber, 1 distribution, and 1 reaper. And overall, the way all these mods come together is when you use your grapple, you're going to spawn in 2 orbs from both heavy-handed and firepower, generally right on top of you. You're going to pick those up to get 4 armor charges, along with a big chunk of your grenade from double innervation, or 1 innervation. And generally, from just using your grapple and killing 1 lane and spawning in the orbs, along with doing damage from all the unravel and threadlings and Thread of Generation, you basically always get your full grapple back. And really, you might only need 1, maybe 2 final blows with your strand weapon to keep death throws going in between. And yeah, it's basically infinite grapples that do double damage, spawn in 3 threadlings, and unravel. It is really strong. And this build transitions into the endgame very well. So with the SMG, you can have built-in overload. And then I use Leviathan's Breath for Unstoppable. You can also use the machine gun along with the Vex Caliber and the SMG once again to cover all 3. Because unraveling rounds from the artifact on the machine gun will be anti-barrier, the glaive will be unstoppable with the artifact perk, and then the SMG is also overload from the artifact. So that is a way to cover all 3 with this build. But generally, most content you only need 2 of the 3, so you can kind of change around depending on what it is. For example, this all sector was unstoppable and anti-barrier, so I put on a pulse just to have more consistent anti-barrier. then still had unstop with the glaive, and use the machine gun as like the main clear along with the grapple to keep death throws going. And it works extremely well for champions. Doing the grapple will basically do almost over half of the champion's health instantly, which is a huge chunk of like instant damage. And the grapple absolutely destroys groups of ads for clear, even majors, wherever they are. There's simply going to die from the melee along with all the threadlings. So yeah, this build is just really good across the board, and more importantly, incredibly fun. It's easily one of the most fun builds I've ever played in Destiny 2, and something you definitely need to be trying out and seeing for yourself. So I'm going to let a little bit of this Lost Sector gameplay play, and I'll be back at roughly 6:20 in the video for the Hunter builds. So now moving on to the Hunter grapple builds. They're going to be kind of similar in the same goals behind them, spamming the grapple. And the Hunter aspects will give you 2 grenade charges, and your grapple creates a grapple tangle at the grapple point. And then we can use our air dodge button to consume our dodge energy, and it will do this like flip and suspend targets. And our fragments we have are generation, ascent for the grenade reload, warding for Woven Mill, then Thread of Mind for getting our class ability back when we defeat suspended targets. So for this, there's going to be 2 different versions. The first one will be with Star Eater Scales to get our super back incredibly fast with this build. And the Silk Strike super is one of the highlights of Strain in general. It's one of the best supers in the game, if not the best. So taking advantage of that as often as possible is going to be really strong. The mods across the board are going to be pretty similar to the Warlock 1. Almost exactly the same up until we get to our bond. One thing I did change is I have an insulation instead of double innervation to help with our class ability. Then once again, I have double kickstart instead of something like bomber, because when we use the air dodge version of our dodge, it does not work with any of these perks. So therefore I have double utility kickstart. And the whole way this build works is you just initially use your grapple and instantly cancel it to create a grapple point. Then from there, you just spam grapple left and right. And every single time you get a final blow, it's going to spawn in 2 orbs, one from heavy-handed, one from firepower. And picking those up will give us a huge chunk of our super back because of starter skills. And before you know it, in like 10 seconds, you'll have your super. And the super is incredibly strong. So I just pop that on cooldown and go crazy, because you're going to get it back before you know it anyways, so you may as well just use it as often as possible. That's kind of like the point of this build. And depending on exactly what you're doing, make sure to pick up 4 orbs before you pop it if you need the increased damage from starter skills. In this Lost Sector, obviously, I'm going to be one-hitting most things anyways, so I just popped it right away. And overall, that is kind of the gameplay loop. What I like to do is set up the tangle point, and while I'm waiting for it to allow me to use my next grapple, I usually use my suspend class ability to kind of freeze everything while I'm waiting. And then from there, I start grappling like crazy, killing things left and right. And comparing this to the Warlock build, you're giving up the threadlings from the grapple, you're giving up the double damage from Verity's Brow, but you have way more grapples. It's literally infinite. You're going to constantly have double grapple charges. But at the same time, once you get to harder content, it might not kill. And you're going to have to be a little bit more careful with what you're swinging on, because if it doesn't die, you're kind of just sitting there point blank range, and that might not be great. So because of that, I think the second version lends itself better to harder content, using this helmet instead, where powered melee final blows grant invisibility and restore a portion of health and shields. And this really picks up where the other build kind of falls off. Using the same mods for the most part, I changed off heavy-handed to bolster and detonation, and that is basically the only change. You could change one of the boot perks to recuperation if you want, but you already get health back from the helmet, so really no need. Then once again, I have triple utility kickstart. And with this build, there really is no weapons you need to make it work, so you can kind of change those around as needed for champions or whatever. depending on what active you're doing it and which champions are in it. You can use something like a Pulse for anti-barrier. You could use the Leviathan's Breath for unstoppable. Your air dodge class ability will suspend, so that is already built in unstop already. So you could also use maybe Thunderlord for overload. You could use Arbalest, you know, whatever it is. And now with this version of the build, you can be kind of more calculated with when you're going into grapple. And the way it works is kind of like the same loop. You set up the grapple point, you use your suspend ability, then you start grappling left and right. But now whenever you get a final blow, you're gonna get health back and go invis, which kind of lets you like reset the scenario and kind of move to where you want to then grapple again. Compared to with Star Eaters and harder content, you kind of swing in and you have no healing. You have a lot of DR with the Woven Mail, and even with a lot of DR, you're never gonna heal, which was like the main issue, unless you change to a recuperation. And with this build being like basically 100% about swinging in with your grapple, you're always in the face of the enemy, and eventually you would die, right? But that is the whole point of this helmet making go invis. You can kind of get health back, take a breather, and be more calculated about when and where you grapple. But it still has the same flaw of if you don't get final blow with the grapple, it kind of all falls apart, which is where the Warlock build, in my opinion, is a little bit stronger, because the grapple does way more damage from Verity's Brow along with the Threadlings. So it's going to be better for Ackler, it's going to be better for single target damage. You're going to be able to still one-hit majors and things like that. And although you can't grapple as much as you can on Hunter, it's going to still be enough for most situations. But I think with the Hunter build, if you get good with it and you know when and where to use it, I think you can definitely make it work. Anyways, I think that's going to be it for the video. Definitely try these builds out. They're incredibly fun. Like usual, thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time.